I'll bring one up. Yeah. Which one do you want? So it's in, you've got like a double dropping lemon and ginger. Okay. That's what you want.
I am confused. I'm like,
Okay. What I'll do is I'll call people forward.
I'm not sure if I should be like, yeah, I don't know what to do.
And I will bring it up. Hello. Hiya. Just going to check in with Sandy upstairs. Are we okay for the live? Yes. Hello. Welcome to the Radical Book Fair tonight. My name is Myri, and it is such a treat to have you here for Music as Life. I'm just going to introduce our chair, JJ, who will then introduce you to our wonderful panel. It's just to let you know there will be time for some questions afterwards. So JJ is a writer, facilitator, and radical based in Edinburgh. Their writing explores the possibility of abolition, feminism, and love to create change. Their work speaks to the political urgencies we face while centering community making and community making in our resistance. So will you join me in welcoming JJ, Adèle, DJ Paulette, and Dave Randall.
Okay, can you hear me in the back row? Wonderful. I'm so excited to be here, not just at the Radical Book Fair, which is like such a good time every year, but because this year I get to talk about music, which is really cool, and I have some fantastic guests here. So I'm going to start introducing them because we have so much to get into. I will start with you on my left. So, winner of the DJ Mag Top 100 Lifetime Achievement Award. And the Key Change PRS Inspiration Award. DJ Paulette has been playing across Europe and the UK for over 30 years. She is born, raised, and still a resident of Manchester. And then in the middle, we have Adèle Oliver, an artist, scholar, and linguist from Birmingham. Her work identifies and amplifies sidelined voices in art and popular culture. Welcome, Adèle. And then last but not least, we have Dave Randall, a musician, producer, and activist. You might recognize him from touring around the world with Faithless, Dido, Sinead O'Connor, and many others. Welcome, Dave. Okay, let's just get straight into it. I want to ask you all, first of all, you've all written about music. DJ Paulette, you're a DJ, of course. Adèle, you're a linguist. You've written about drill music. And Dave, you wrote about how you became a musical activist, or you brought activism to your musical career. Why do you think music and politics are so inseparable? I do love a bit of popular culture. We've seen recently... who's that horrible man? Matty Healy. What band is he?
1975.
The 1975. Thank you very much. He was like, oh, why would I need to be political? A lot of musicians now saying, I don't want to get involved in politics. But we are also seeing concerts for Palestine, concerts for Sudan and Congo, people donating profits to these causes. In each of your industries or in your specific careers, how have you come to politics and why is that a mainstay in your work? Do you want to go first, DJ Paulette?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Oh, I think you have a...
Yeah, forgot about this. I came to music through my career because I work very much on the LGBT circuit. So, music 100% before I've even started to consider anything else has always been political, whether it's been soul music, disco music. You can go through all the eras to house music, black queer clubs, music of resistance, music with a message. House music started in the black queer clubs, Chicago, Detroit, and, knowing where its roots came from, it's impossible to extricate one from the other. So whatever I was playing musically was going to represent in that way. And apart from that, music has always been political. Every country has a national anthem. That's how far back politics and music goes. Whether you're banging on drums, singing spirituals, holding hands in Woodstock, music and politics is a very powerful and potent mix. It's a very powerful way to get a message across without putting it on a pamphlet or in a newspaper or on a radio station where it might not get played. So,
yeah, I would say, thinking about when I was a child, I grew up in a very Jamaican evangelical context, and for all its flaws, what that taught me was the power of sound to not just move, but to mobilize. So when I would listen to this gospel music, these spirituals, follow the line down my own ancestry and the ancestry of my people, I was like, oh, that beat has always been the rhythm of change. A bit of a cliche there, but you know what I mean? Like, there has always been this consistent vibration of sound to move us forward, and that is inherently political, even if you're trying to depoliticize it in a religious context or whatever else. So that's how I first came to, I think, as a child, think about it in a political way. Yeah.
JJ actually said that this would be the first question, and I wanted to share a quote with you because I think it feels relevant and kind of underlines a lot of what DJ Paulette and Adèle have both said already. But one of the most important music-led political campaigns in kind of living history in Britain was a campaign called Rock Against Racism. And one of the founders of Rock Against Racism, a guy called David Widgery, said this. He said, "Our experience taught us a golden political rule. Where people find their pleasure, entertainment and celebration is also where they find their sexual identity, their political courage, and their strength to change." Now, I think that remains true, and therefore when we talk about music, we aren't just talking about entertainment or commerce. We're talking about part of the process by which we become fully human. And on some occasions, music is part of the process by which we forget our humanity. There's nothing inherently progressive about music, and I think we need to be clear about that. So that's on the side of how we receive music as music lovers. But then you've got to think about the ways in which music has been manipulated and the ways that people have tried to control it. That really underlines its power. And we've seen that recently, haven't we, with Kneecap. When Kneecap's criticisms of Israel, when Kneecap calling out the genocide in Gaza on stage at Coachella, when a video of that started to go viral, somebody went through recent videos of the band in an attempt to try to silence them. And of course, the Metropolitan Police dutifully took up the cause, charging them under the Terrorism Act. But in a sense, what was most interesting was also that leaked letter trying to get them cancelled from Glastonbury, a letter written by 30 high-ranking music executives in the British music industry. So music is very powerful and it's politically contested. So I think we need to talk about how to win that contest.
Thank you so much for bringing up Kneecap. I think, what you're saying is really important. It can be used both ways. I think about people singing together. I'm also thinking about Bob Vylan and how he started that chant at Glastonbury, and maybe people who, if you had had a conversation with them an hour before, they might not have spoken about Israel and Palestine, but suddenly were swept up and felt that atmosphere and felt the force. And I love that you speak about affect in your book, Adèle. Music lets us actually feel something and it pierces through here. But I'm very interested in the fact that maybe that's not their message. Sometimes we can also listen and let the words pass over us. And it's still really important to speak about what is the political message trying to be communicated here. Just singing along is not enough. So as you've all spoken about politics and music together and how that's intertwined, I wonder if you could talk about what is the political message in your books that you're trying to get across in the music that you're referencing. So if that's house music, I remember you did a collective song with other artists for the apartheid against apartheid in South Africa.
Palestine, Freedom for Palestine, the song.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Yes, I was thinking about
apartheid in South Africa is in my living memory, but I was I was a little bit too young to be active. I do talk briefly to Jerry Dammers of the Specials and the Special AKA, who was kind of, for me, the most inspirational figure in Britain leading the campaign against apartheid. So yes. Long-winded, yeah. Yeah,
you were in your group. You kind of wanted to replicate that like political single, and I think you talk about how it was difficult to move through the charts with a independent song as well. Could you just speak a bit about why did that song come together? How did that group come together, and what was the message that you were trying to deliver?
Well, I think it would be very different now, and I'm delighted to see Brian Eno kind of staging Palestine Solidarity gigs at Wembley Arena. And indeed, Kneecap headlining the following night. So for the worst possible reasons, the genocide in Gaza, the idea that we should be acting in solidarity with the Palestinians is now much more mainstream than it was when I recorded that song with some of the other members of Faithless and a South African gospel choir, the Durban Gospel Choir, and a bunch of other people about 10 years ago. I did a number of interviews around that time also related to Palestine solidarity work. And I think what was most interesting was that it kind of landed me in trouble with management. I was on tour with Faithless in South Africa, and I did a bunch of interviews and was asked to do an advert essentially in support of the Palestinian calls for the cultural boycott of Israel. So I recorded a radio advert in support of that. It aired in South Africa on their equivalent of Radio 1. And it got me in quite a lot of trouble with Faithless's management, who tried, even though Maxi Jazz, the vocalist at the time, he's no longer with us, but even though Maxi Jazz was absolutely supportive, he agreed with me on this question, and most of the band did too. Despite that, the band sort of tried to isolate and distance the brand, as it were, from what I'd said, which I thought was interesting at the time and a bit disappointing. Of course, I later find out that the same management agency are on that list of executives signing the letter trying to cancel Kneecap. So, that was quite clarifying for me. But yes, you do pay a price very often for sticking your head above the parapet and becoming political, but it's what you have to do, I think. It's a price worth paying. You have to be true to yourself as far as you possibly can be.
Thank you so much. Before we come to you, Adèle, and I'm going to speak about drill specifically, DJ Paulette, could I ask you, you spoke about Detroit and Chicago and those roots of house music. What I find really interesting is that there's very sparse lyrics in house and disco, electronic, but there is still something being communicated. There's still a vibe. What do you think that vibe is saying?
I've done it again. I think it depends really what, whether you're listening to gospel house or deep house or, or techno. Some of the tracks have got vocals. And generally the message is, one of uplifting. It comes from the church. So, it's like, we'll raise them up, how to raise people up and how to get to tomorrow in a positive way and that kind of thing. But also a lot of self-love and black pride and pride in who you are and pride in your people, that kind of thing. So there is a lyrical message underpinning it. And, also it's not just the Chicago, Detroit side of it. There are instances of black house music all over the world, from Manchester to Burnley to London. So there, and political in that it has come and it has happened. That music has been made here as well. So in a way, it's it's how it's represented that's political, even if there isn't a song or a message there. It's who made it and who did it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think about the rise of Amapiano in the UK. That's like electronic music coming out of South Africa. And the fact that it is gaining popularity in the UK shows not only like an increasing diaspora, but also black spaces for partying and dance and clubs. So yeah, the context in which it's produced can also be political. And Adèle, you speak a lot about this in your book. You speak about drill music, and I was so excited. Adèle's book is called Deeping It, and I was really inspired by how you use language and like applied that to critical theory. As soon as I opened the first page, I don't know if anybody is a drill fan in this audience, but I just so wanted to speak to somebody about Diggity coming out of jail. And I was like, oh my God, this is the space. Yeah, you speak about people maybe who don't identify as political activists or, representations of a political movement, but they're just being there is political. Can you speak a bit about criminalization in drill music and why those rappers become political actors?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about what DJ Paulette was saying about this positive message that we have coming from gospel through house, which is very true and which I also love. But how blackness is an inherently political life, being black, but then also how there is value and there is so much space in things that aren't necessarily positive. And I think what drill does so sharply is sit in that dark place and still bring people along. And that is very, very scary when firstly you think the people that are doing it are criminal, and when you see people joining in with that. Drill is like, even more than any other genre we've seen come through the UK, or really any other style of rap, dark, violent, aggressive in sound and in lyrics, and even without the lyrics, there's something very delicious but sinister about it. And I don't think that's something to shy away from, nor is it something that cannot mobilize. But in a court of law, for example, that is only seen as negative. Where in so many other walks of life, we see things that are harsh or what people wouldn't see as a positive message. We understand that there's work to be done in shadow, and there's also, that's where a lot of people are. So we can't just come with positivity without speaking to people that are in that place, or speaking to just generally society which is in that place. So I can't remember your question.
Yeah, I mean, it was, about why are these people considered like political actors? Why is their life politicized? And you speak about it brilliantly, like black life is politicized. Something that really came to mind in your book as well is like, we work in the shadows, and this is art, and it's interesting who is like allowed to make art and who is not. There was just a talk here 30 minutes ago about sex scenes and like sex on stage, and people have, there's varying like spectrums of like consent and violence in like displaying intimacy, but nobody would put a film director in jail and say, this is what you believe in because this is what you represented on screen, which is really interesting. Just to shift away a little bit, I want to ask about sobriety. In Edinburgh, there's been like sober parties, and I speak to a lot of queer people that are exploring sobriety, struggling with addiction, and although we want to go to nightlife spaces and feel free and release, it seems like the script is still go and get drunk and get totally wasted. I want to ask you guys, how can we connect outside of drugs and alcohol, whether it be at the club, at festivals, at gigs? What is it how could we like lean into the music without substances?
Yeah, I mean, that is a tricky one, because everything about hospitality and events and entertainment spaces, wherever you're sponsors come from. The sponsors of alcohol companies are the ones with the money. They're going to be the ones that, kind of bankroll your event. So you're going to have the name plastered all over everywhere, and you know that they're going to be supplying the bars, and they're going to want people to buy that drink at the bar. But if you are sober, how can we encourage people to, first of all, take a sober message into a non-sober event? Well, quite simple. Stock something more than water and Fanta for your non-drinkers. Make it a bit more exciting to be a non-drinker in a drinking space. It's not brain surgery, but people just don't do it because they make more money on alcohol. Or, put a tea space in there, put a tea tent in there, put a tea and coffee tent in there. It's not impossible, but people don't want to do it because it doesn't make as much money. However, I would contest that and say, put a tent in and find out, rather than just say no. That's from a personal level, even just in terms of DJing and not drinking, the amount of times on my rider where I've got asked for a bottle of No Secco and people have given me Prosecco because they thought it was a joke. It's like, I know I don't want the alcoholic one. So if you can't get it right on an artist level, how are they going to get it right on a punter level? But you're asking for people's minds to be open in a way that they can accommodate both in the same space. And I don't think it's a case of making sober parties for sober people, because in a way I think that's not fair. You're kind of making a little party for a few people and saying that those few people can't enjoy the huge party in the big space. And I think integration is more, I think finding some way that it can be integrated is better than just segregating the non-drinkers. It's just a me thing.
Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I think the event is the most important thing, and so it becomes a question about how do you make events work financially, and maybe that's a discussion that we'll get around to. We'll be able to talk about the Music Venues Trust and so on, but there is a recognition that a lot of venues prefer bands that sell, a lot of booze to their fans, because that's where the venue often make their money. But it's true that alcohol-free beer is just as expensive. I've realised, because I'm not drinking. I've been pretty much straight edge for about 6 months and loving it. But yeah, it's so they can make money still. But I know I agree with DJ Paulette. I think it's important that the events themselves are as inclusive as possible, and that they continue to thrive. Live music events or live events that bring people together. And the reason why I say that is because so many of us actually feel increasingly atomized, alienated, lonely, actually. Because, I think for several reasons. I mean, I talk about this briefly in the book, but partly kind of the political orthodoxy means that there's less and less affordable spaces where we can go out and kind of spend time with each other, sort of community centres being shut down, sports centres being shut down, and so on and so on. And that's been happening for 2 generations at least. And of course, social media comes along and appears to provide a solution. We can stay at home but still stay in touch with people. But it's a really low quality, low bandwidth connection. An emoji is not the same as having a hug. It's not the same. And discussing concerns with your community is not the same as arguing with a bot. Of course it's not. So we do need to come together. We need spaces to be as inclusive as possible. And we need the spaces themselves. So like I say, it goes back to that question of how do you survive as a venue, as a community venue, including an arts and music venue at the moment.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to ask this question is because as we become more atomized, it just seems very, very unfair to me that these venues get to mediate how we spend time together and how we connect, and making profit off of addiction and especially vulnerable groups. It doesn't sit right with me. Something I wanted to raise to you guys. But we could go on to, the industry and like sustainability a bit more. COVID and the pandemic really, really hit hospitality hard. It hit performers hard, artists and musicians. And it gave us kind of a break from spending time together. So we became out of practice. I want to ask you how you've seen the pandemic impact the music industry and what can we do for our survival?
Who wants to go first? Should I go first? I think it's very interesting that as we went into the pandemic, so this is 2020, and it's all in lockdown, and everyone's getting fed up, and it's like, oh my God, if I can go clubbing again, I'm going to go to all the clubs, I'm going to support all the clubs, and I will never, ever, I will never, ever underestimate how important it is for us to be together. And then fast forward to 2025, and what we've seen happen, which we couldn't really have foreseen, is that all the little clubs are closing, all the big events are getting bigger. So there's this huge gap in how people can and do go out now. So the people that said, oh, we'll go to everything, now can't go to everything because the ticket price is so expensive. You're not going out every week or twice a month like you used to. You're going out once a month or once every 2 months now. And that has its own economic, domino effect on what is actually happening in hospitality and events. And it's like we have still not really recovered from the economic impact of the pandemic. And on top of the pandemic, we've got the cost of living crisis. We've got ticket master and ticket agencies doing whatever they want with, stepped prices of tickets and that kind of thing. And people just haven't got the money to do what they were doing in 2025. They haven't got the money, the kind of disposable cash to spend on club nights as they would. But what I would urge people to do is, it's all great. I love a big event. I play at quite a few of them, but I also play some smaller events, and I would urge people to kind of balance out how they are supporting the big and the small events and try and do a bit of both, because if you only ever do your Glastonbury's and your O2 arenas and that, pretty soon you won't have the smaller clubs that you can pay a £5 or a £10 or 20 quid in. Pretty soon they won't exist, and it will be quick and it will be swift. So if you like those clubs where you can go and hang out with 100 mates, 100 people or 200 people, if you like those clubs, support them. And that's what I see as the way forward. And for the bigger events organisations like your O2, Co-op Live that we have in Manchester, they have to support grassroots venues with, and they've started to do it anyway, with a donation on the ticket price which goes to grassroots venues, and that in some way should help sustain the events industry. Hopefully, that's cross fingers. That's my 10 pence worth. Next.
I was going to say, to kind of change tack a little bit, but on the pandemic, I think what was interesting is for drill as a very super youth-driven, studio-based genre, it gave so many people a chance to hone craft during that time. But as they were honing their craft, so were the Met Police, because they were catching up with how to take this video down? Which social media platform can I get into contact with and have that relationship where I can ask you to remove stuff and you take it down immediately? So I think the pandemic, in terms of like the criminalization of drill music, was a really pivotal time, because there was so much attention turned to online as a space of connection, but then also a space of danger. And from that, like between the summer of 2021 and the summer of 2022, the Met Police asked social media platforms to remove over 950 videos, all of which were drill videos, and over 850 of those were removed, as in all the videos on social media in the UK, and only drill videos were removed. So it just shows the extent to which there's this moral panic around drill, where there was all kinds of content at that time and now that are actually a danger. But that is what, the Met Police were focusing on.
This is my chance to talk about the Music Venues Trust. So to go back to what DJ Paulette was saying, I think that's an important distinction that you made between the small events and venues and the big events. And by the way, what you just said reminds me very much of a chapter in the history of Carnival. Actually, there's parallels there, so perhaps we'll come back to that. But just to talk about this, the music industry and the pandemic, I quote in the book a senior analyst from a music industry analyst firm called Media. His name is Mark Mulligan, and he looks at kind of the profit streams for the major rights holders, the kind of the Universal Music Group, the Warners, the big players in the music industry. And he literally says, we can stop, he said a year or two ago, we can stop talking about post-pandemic, basically business is booming. And I think it's important to be aware of that there are huge sums of money being generated in the music industry. It's just not being shared out. And this connects for me with the need for redistributive politics in general. We need to take more money from the super rich and share it out. Absolutely. Now, whether that's delivered by Zach Polanski or your party, well, we don't, that's a slightly separate discussion, but it is a discussion we need to have. Now, part of that redistribution of wealth needs to go into funding venues and the arts and music education and proper access for all to music education and so on. Now, in the meantime, there is an initiative which I think is interesting and worthy of our support. So the Music Venue Trust was set up to try to protect grassroots venues, and they effectively have suggested a voluntary redistributive levy on the big shows like arena and stadium shows. The idea is that £1 from every ticket sold for an arena or stadium show, when Taylor Swift comes to town, £1 from every ticket will go via the Music Venues Trust to grassroots venues. That's a good idea. It's a form of redistributive tax. I mean, the trouble, I suppose, is that that pound will be passed on to the punter, no doubt, rather than taken off the profits of the big promoter. So that's a problem. It's also, I think, a bit of a problem that it's a voluntary tax, but actually that's what MVT want at the moment. I suppose their logic is that if the government make it compulsory, then it will just go into the treasury, and will they actually see any of it? So there's all sorts of, technical questions which economists need to look at, but I do think that fundamentally that's what we need to say, that there's plenty of money in society. It's just being sucked up by the less than 1%. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think those are some brilliant suggestions that you guys have raised. I know I wouldn't say this, but backstage we spoke about ingenuity and, like, DJ Paulette, in your book, I love that you spoke about, this is not your wording, but like how being broke produces like ingenuity.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of heading towards that anyway, because we're getting to a stage where artists aren't being paid properly for their art. And we're heading towards a kind of DIY crunch where it's like, I am going to take this on for myself, do it myself, and create whatever needs to be created to push this thing forward, because when you can't get round the big mammoth companies who are holding all the cash, there has to be some kind of rebellious reaction to it. That's what rave was in the first place. It's just unfortunate that where rave is now it's just become a big corporate part of the big corporate machine again. So.
Yeah, but I definitely feel like it could go back, and it has to. Like, we don't have a choice, as you say. We don't have a choice. If you want to listen to diasporic sounds, if you want to listen to something outside of the top 40, if you want to listen to something other than, this is my like white boy DJ name, like Ketman 2000, like then you have to put on your own party, and he plays 6 days a week down at Cowgate Trust, like. Yeah, so you have to put on your own stuff. Even this is an example of DIY organizing. We have a citywide festival that celebrates reading and books. I'm not going to name them. But we're also here. There's something more. And I also believe there's something really important about competition and competing with, like, institutions or organizations that are well above your weight, showing them that they shouldn't take their audience for granted, and we could so easily walk somewhere else if we don't see ourselves represented in the program or represented with who's on stage. In Scotland, it's such a big thing to have DIY nights. Like, I'm sure everybody here has gone to like a DIY night before. So yeah, it's something I really wanted to get some hope and advice about, because we spoke about there's a lot of big parties closing. So not getting onto Notting Hill Carnival, maybe Adèle, we could speak about that. I don't know, you're not the expert, but there was like a big article that came out in The Guardian this summer about Notting Hill Carnival being in masses of debt because they have to pay or contribute to the policing costs of their own carnival, which is just absolutely wild. We're seeing Manchester Pride go bankrupt, Brighton Pride like calling emergencies. Yeah, even these big venues are on their knees. Yeah, I don't know do you have any thoughts about that kind of like policing of Notting Hill Carnival? And it's kind of become a trap. Like, they don't have a choice but to pay. They can't account for all the people that are going to come down, and now they are being forced to pay. It just seems like a double bind.
Yeah, it's what I was at We Out Here Festival this summer. It was my first time going, and I loved it. I was like, there is not a police, obviously it's an enclosed space, but I forgot that I was like in the UK, to be quite honest with you, because I was like, what is this? There was nothing. And I was thinking about the tax that is also put on being free in a public space. Like you're saying, the police, you're paying for the police to be there as a presence. And Notting Hill Carnival has been and still is this kind of moral panic around black people coming together personified. There is, when I do workshops in school, sometimes I bring this letter that was doing the rounds on Twitter during the pandemic, which was somebody in the Notting Hill area basically telling their neighbour that they're playing music too loud. It was very like racialized language. And it really made me think about how much of popular culture is just recycled black music, but it needs to be packaged in a particular way. It reminds me of how you can just get anything delivered to your door, but if that delivery driver turned up unannounced, ooh, scary. But like, I want my burger. But there's like this assumption that you can have the thing in a particular package and it doesn't exist otherwise. And that is how everybody who exists outside of the whatever is normative is treated. But I think particularly with music, it's so easy to treat as noise and a nuisance when it is not coming from the people you desire at the time you desire it. I want to hear it on Spotify. I don't want to hear you on the street singing all of that nonsense, you know? So I think Notting Hill is really a representation of that. And as it becomes more corporatized and all of this stuff, as like the money is going, You know, what does that mean for people who are at grassroots level performing those same songs that are having their lyrics brought up in a courtroom, but last week it was on the radio?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh my gosh, you guys want to come?
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep it brief. Since I moved to Bristol 3 years ago, I feel like it's my duty to mention St Paul's Carnival, which is fantastic. If there are any London snobs, as I used to be, who think that nothing can compete with Notting Hill. Well, actually, St Paul's, it's smaller in scale, but it's absolutely brilliant. One of my neighbours, Latoya, is the artistic director and is somewhat responsible for trying to find the funding for it. And it's almost impossible. 2 years ago, Carnival took place. This summer, it didn't take place. They couldn't raise enough money. But you know what? The sound systems came out anyway. And it was a brilliant weekend anyway. Now, I think that would be much harder to do in Notting Hill if ever they were to succeed, which they won't, but if ever they were to succeed in, you know, banning Carnival in West London. Bristol is a famously, relatively speaking, libertarian kind of a city. But still, I think the spirit is something that we should celebrate and try to emulate as best we can. Let's do it anyway.
Yeah, the DIY, that DIY culture, it's kind of pushing people to do that. Either we have two choices. It either goes DIY or it gets so massively corporatized that thing that we love, that Notting Hill Carnival, that Manchester Pride, because, you know, Manchester Pride went officially bankrupt last week. And, you know, already the vultures are circling from Bruntwood, Live Nation, you name it. They are all circling to take this bastion of queer culture, to take it and make it a money-spinning fuckfest that nobody wants. But this is the choice, because the problem with all of these things is funding. It's money. And unfortunately, the people that hold the purse strings, the fattest wallets, are the companies that we don't necessarily really even want associated with the events. But if the people who hold the event, black people, queer people, you know, whatever festival it is, if we can't get the money together, and this is one of the problems with Notting Hill Carnival, they can never get the funding on time. They make them wait until the last possible minute to authorise the money from the council to fund the policing. They purposefully do not authorise, and it's the same like England over, whether in Manchester, Bristol, you know, these are the reasons. It's like we are being blocked, actively blocked from doing this event and kind of pushed into a corner so they can say, you haven't got the money. And then lo and behold, 2 years later, guess who does that event? So we have a choice. We either say, okay, well, we don't need your money, but we're going to do it anyway, like St. Paul's, and take a risk. And then, you know, whatever happens, happens. Or we say, okay, let it get corporate. And then it's not that event anymore. And this is one of the things they have been crying about with Notting Hill Carnival, is that the sponsors have moved too much into it. And it's not black anymore. It's nothing to do with the black communities, or it's got less and less to do with the black communities if we let the sponsors move in. And this is the worry with Manchester Pride. If we let Bruntwood or Live Nation buy into it, then how queer is it going to be? You know, so anyway, that's...
No, not any... Literally, don't get me started on funding. I could pull people out of the crowd now, and I'm sure people would have a story to tell about... We have... You know, so you have Arts Council England, or maybe like some music grants in England. In Scotland, we have Creative Scotland, and there's also like specific music and like fringe funding that you can get, and it is just so overly represented amongst like white people, and you see the same events come back again and again. And yeah, it just feels like there's one sacred space for like a person of color or like a POC crew of people. It just really does feel so hollowed out.
I just think there's got to be a way of balancing it out. Don't get me wrong, I work for all of these companies. You know, I work on all of these stages, and I appreciate how much it takes to put on these events. But I think there has to be a balance between the actual culture of it and the financing, the economics of it.
Yeah, I want to ask you guys one more question before we go to audience questions. So if you have a burning question, please come and join the discussion. I'd love to hear your perspective, what interests you about music, where you're coming from. But it's about that money, and everybody's got to eat, right? This is your career, you want to get ahead. How can we resist commodification? Something that I really related to in your book, Adèle, was you with drill, and I'm sure that you can all think of a white artist in the charts now who has a very dark tan and speaks with an accent that they definitely weren't born with, and has suddenly speaks in African American vernacular, even though they live in Bolton or something, I have no idea, but we see these industry plants or kind of copycats of subversive culture, and they are allowed to be the palatable face of it. So it's the white girl can give you rap, or Central C can give you rap and talk about drill and talk about selling cocaine on school campuses, but if a black drill artist was to do that, he's going to go straight to prison. And you speak about the music machine that pushes these kind of culture vultures to the forefront because they're much easier to control, and it's much easier to extract the profit from them. So could you speak about commodification in the music industry? And then I want to ask you guys how you resist that as artists. How do you not accept the devil's cherry?
Ooh, the devil's cherry. Devil's cherry.
It would be nice to refuse.
Got a couple bite marks in it. Okay, I think so. What you were saying about the culture vulture kind of being platformed. Then there's the other side where, we're in an attention economy, and now whatever is even more outrageous, whatever is more of what it's supposed to be, the most dramatic version is going to sell more. And I think with rap music, it has always been the case that people want you to be, the conventions of the genre are authenticity, but then as a consumer, whether you are white or otherwise, you want that person to be authentic. And for them to be authentic, they actually need to be poor. They actually need to have had a hard life. They actually need to be speaking about things that are true. Not true as in this is what I did on my day-to-day, but these are the conditions that I live under. And so if we are trying to go push everything further towards the extreme, who is a record label going to pick out that is going to fit the description of that in today's age? They are extracting young black kids that are actually living that experience and are being platformed because of that, and then being dropped as soon as something happens to them. So I think there's the idea of how you defy commodification as a person who is firstly an adult, and then also a person that is, comfortable and okay. And then how the current music industry, especially as it pertains to rap, really doesn't allow that to happen. Then on top of that, it's completely depoliticized when you get to the point, because it's all about money in the first place. So essentially, I guess what I'm saying is it's such a double-edged sword, because as soon as you, step into the trope that you need to hype up to be able to make money, the less power you are given to do anything except that. It's not impossible, but it's also not just this something you can stand up against the man and you are going to be able to change the thing. which has always been the case for the music industry. But I just wanted to make the point that there's such extractivism going on, and often we're talking about people that haven't even lived a life yet. So it's really difficult to, have that conversation in earnest with a lot of these young people. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, people are growing up in the music industry, and I'm sure you both have felt that as well. What about you, DJ Paulette? How you obviously want to be at the top of your career, but you also want to remain authentic to your base and, do these organize these events. But, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to want to be the best person I can be at every level I can be at without playing at some of these huge events, and wanting to play at some of these huge events at the, and not playing enough of the smaller events. Everybody kind of wants to be bigger and play bigger and everything. So it's quite difficult, It would be great to say, I don't ever want to play for this corporation or whatever, but unfortunately they control like half of the festivals all over the world, so it's not possible to do that. And I think the best thing to do is to remain real and authentic about what you do. So, I'm playing them, but I can also tell the truth. And you're not just accepting whatever situations there are and letting it all wash over you and just taking the money. I think that is dangerous. I think if we kind of if I think about it for myself, first of all, and then I am clear about what the situation is when I'm talking to other people about it, then I'm kind of leaving the way open for everybody to make an informed decision about how they spend their money and how they party and who they support and whatever. You can't make people do anything, but you can kind of give them enough information that they can make their own decisions, and that's the hope. You can write books, you can give information, you can write songs, you can give information, and then hope that that kind of level of authenticity will keep you and will keep me solid in how I need to progress in life.
I think we need each other. We need evenings like this evening where we get to talk and share and compare notes. I think we need to join organisations, campaign organisations at least. We need to be serious about this project of making the world a better place. And for us, our corner is music and culture. And so that's where our focus needs to be. And if you look at the story of the most politically impactful songs throughout the 20th century, at least, it's always been organised networks of activists who have made that possible. I mean, I briefly tell the story of Strange Fruit, the song made famous by Billie Holiday, but it's also true of Nelson Mandela, the Special AKA song that was really important in the anti-apartheid struggle, and so on and so on. It was actually suggested by Oliver Tambo, the leader of the ANC. It was his son living in London in exile who suggested to Jerry Dammers that he should organise the anti-apartheid movement, which culminated in 200,000 people in Clapham Common, and then the huge gig in Wembley Stadium that you might remember, while Nelson Mandela, the older people in the audience might remember, and this was when Nelson Mandela was still in prison. Wembley Stadium was full of people protesting against that. That came from the ANC partly. So the political organisation bit. Rosa Parks, she was a member of the American Communist Party. That hardly ever gets mentioned. I was just a tired African-American woman who sat down on the bus. No, that was a planned political action, planned by the Communist Party. So I think we need each other, and we need to be serious about that.
Yeah, and I think definitely, I love that, we do need each other, and it is for us to be as vocal as possible so that the big businesses listen to what you and we are saying about the situation. They can't just we need to coexist. We need to understand each other. And if we don't understand each other, then we need to resist.
Thank you, guys. Let's go to audience questions. So I think we have time for one. Is there, or we could do two. No, don't be sorry. This has been so amazing.
Here we go. Yes, in the interest of time, a question is a single sentence with a question mark at the end. There was one over there, and I've got one online. So if we do, there were many online. So I'm going to pick one at random. Sorry, guys, which is going to be Raoul, who said, how do you navigate the constraints of tight budgets and the ecological impact of travel with all that touring or cultural exchange brings to what you create or feeds in your connections or your imaginations?
Shall I quickly, because I've just had an email from two organisations that are relevant, Raoul. Music Declares Emergency and Brian Eno's Earth Percent. So those are two websites. There are others. Rachel's Bicycle, I think, is another good one. Has anyone heard of? I hope I'm getting their name right. So there are organisations looking at those questions and doing some good work. I'm actually meeting with Earth Percent later in the month.
Thank you so much. Question for everybody, but I appreciate we're at time. Do you have any specific examples of music endeavours currently that are giving you hope?
Of music?
Music endeavours that are giving you hope.
You know what? I was going to say it as a caveat to my answer about drill rappers and stuff, and I was thinking, I'm not trying to infantilize them because a lot of them are big people, but a lot of what I think is missing from music at the moment that is inherently political is people depoliticizing it with their own politics, which are often like capitalistic, misogynistic, ism schism, you know what I mean? So what I would say is a lot of stuff that's giving me hope at the moment is stuff that I'm going back to SoundCloud days and just seeing what people are creating themselves rather than turning to people who have money to do so, because honestly it's just disappointment after disappointment, to be quite honest.
I think there's a little seam of indie parties that are happening in Manchester that are just really, you know, whether it's on the queer scene or house scene, that are just really vibrant. And I think looking at them also using young and old DJs and performers on the same lineup, I think that kind of, that kind of mix and blend, that's giving me hope that we are all starting to work together in the same party, on the same lineup, to attract a mixed crowd and keep it going that way.
Yeah, I would also recommend Gully. They do parties between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and that's really fun. If I could also do a cheeky self-plug, come to my party. It's called Rave for Good, and you will hear diasporic sounds and floor performers and art installations, and at the end we give away all the money raised to an artist experimenting with a new project. So, yeah, come to that. Yeah. Can we do one more? Is that time? Is there anyone in the room? Otherwise, there's another one online. Come on, guys.
They can have this. From Joy, love this chat. With a long view that you guys have on gigs and creating, how do we call community in about showing up, the whole if you don't use it, you lose it, and not always just showing up in solidarity when folks are censored?
Does anyone want to go first?
Was that about events and gigs?
Yeah,
when people
like community organising in general.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think when the music's good, people do. One example would be the southeast London jazz and jazz adjacent kind of scene that really broke through in a big way 10 years ago. Sons of Comet is coming. Shabaka Hutchins and that crew. Ezra Collective now, I suppose, are the most famous part of that scene. But their events held at small venues in different parts of London, like Steam Down over in Deptford, and there were a bunch of key venues, and people would queue. A young, diverse crowd would queue round the block to get into those jam sessions, like Steam Down. It's moved to Peckham now, and they probably still do. So I think it's like what I was saying about the atomization, the loneliness, the feeling that we don't just want to stay home on social media. I think there's an appetite for good nights and for good music. If we can find the spaces, people will show up.
I was also going to say, disclaimer on my last answer, I realised I'm really hungry and that's why I'm cranky. There's so much hope in the world. Sorry. But to answer, I was like, what was that? Sorry about that. Anyway, but to answer that question quickly, I think something that I've had to remind myself of recently is really actually going to people and connecting on a one-to-one level with people. Even if that is online, but really actually speaking to people and not just like putting a story out or putting a call out or sharing an event or sharing a thing. And I think being asked, if you are interested in this, do you want to come with me, is always a good way to start.
I know one thing that has really kind of made me happy and enthusiastic and feel really inspired is, I talked earlier about Manchester Pride going bankrupt, but seeing people react to that by really pulling together the amount of sort of WhatsApp groups that are kind of flying around within the queer community about how can we fix this, what should we do? And it's just been like, there's that moment in the Terminator when she kind of shoots the robot and it's like mercury that drifts all over the floor, but then you just watch it all come back together. And I think that's what will happen, is that all these smaller groups that have been told are alternative pride and that are on the periphery, they are pride, and everybody's realizing that every single one of these groups, whether it's the houses, the voguers or the performers or all these smaller parties, that they are pride and they are going to become pride for next year. So that's a space actually that I am really interested to see what happens for 2026.
I love that idea of, after all the funders have scurried away, all the
who are we?
Yeah, all the alternative prize come out and just should we just get back to doing what we were doing in the first place? If I could give a suggestion, I would say I love the idea of food and feeding people, also allowing people to participate how they would like to participate, what speaks to their skills. Sometimes we need something and just be we need to get okay with the idea we haven't found the person who is going to help yet. I don't know, in an age where people are realizing their access needs and speaking more about disability and tiredness and fatigue, me personally, I would love to get invited somewhere to be hey, we've just had a community meal. Would you like to wash the dishes? Beautiful. I put on my headphones. I don't have to talk to anybody. I'm just washing the dishes. I know I've done my bit and I can go home. But if you say, do you want to come to the community meal and mind map with people you've never spoken to before for an indefinite amount of time, I'm not coming to that meeting. I don't care how much the cause, I'll send my notes ahead of time. So, thinking about people maybe want to do smaller tasks, like how can we break it up? And if it's not possible, it's so real that people burn out, they take on all of that, take a rest and let us all feel that absence. Like, that's okay. You don't need to break your back, like doing something. Like let us feel that absence and then gather the people that will think about next steps together. Don't work until you break. Like, let's be sustainable in our energy. So I think that's all that we have time for. I want to thank you guys so much for such a rich conversation. I can see organizers in the crowd. I can see performers. I can see singers and dancers. And I know that this, even people online, I'm like, oh, okay, need to go listen to that person's EP. I know that this will be a resource that is like referred back to quite often, and it's been incredibly valuable for me. So thank you so much. I can't recommend these books enough. If you've spoken to me in the last month, I have spoken to you about these books. So please do get it signed. Please go speak to the authors, ask them questions you didn't get to ask, and let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, JJ.
There we go. While they make their very elegant exit, I will just point out that the bar is open. If you did want a drink, they have non-alcoholic alternatives. The signing table is at the back on the right. And at about past, we've got the very brilliant Buff Whaley, and there will be a mix of music and talking about a life of music and activism. And it's going to be very brilliant. So if you want to stick around for that, you are very welcome.